Here we are with Salvador Bosque. Salvador lives to push things forward, digital native. He helps customers living his experience in cloud and digital transformation technologies. Having led international strategic IT projects, his experience spans cloud enterprise architecture, TOGAF, omnichannel and mobile solutions. He's also agile advocate and Lean Six Sigma Green Belt. Para aquellos que tengan el inglés oxidado, como yo ahora mismo, tengo que decirles que piensa siempre en empujar el cloud y las tecnologías de la transformación digital como una ayuda y experiencia y, por supuesto, lidera proyectos estratégicos de IT y, sobre todo, lo que interesa es arquitecturas en cloud para omnicanalidad y para soluciones móviles. Y, por supuesto, también es un gran prescriptor. Yo no quiero entretenerles más. Muchas gracias, Salvador. Aquí tienes tu audiencia. Puedes dedicar, sabes, una persona que no entiende inglés, como quieras decir. Muy amable. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Ignacio. Thank you, Ignacio. Okay, so I would like to make the presentation in English just for you, especially. So forgive my English because it's not so good. In any case, so everybody has listened about the boom that the cloud technology and the cloud service providers are offering right now. In fact, for example, Amazon Web Services has just raised about 45% of the revenue in comparison with the last quarter, while Microsoft Azure has increased about 76% of its revenue in the last quarter in the same period. And for example, don't forget China, Alibaba Cloud will raise up to $1 billion in revenue for this quarter. So we're talking about a huge market. And in our experience, there are many companies that have adopted a right cloud strategy to adopt the cloud using a cloud-first mindset. But some of the companies that have tried to adopt the cloud have some struggles trying to get into the pace of getting the real benefits that the cloud can provide. What kind of benefits? We're talking about the ability to pay only for what you use, the ability to scale and to adapt according to your demand, and all of these advantages can only be achieved if you have three things. If you have the right architecture, this means that if your legacy applications are not designed for the cloud, probably you will not take full advantage of the cloud services. And you have to train your people in order to these people to be really knowledgeable about the cloud experience and the cloud services that can provide. And also, regarding the cost, probably if you are a CIO, you may get the question from your CEO to cut your budget about, let's say, 5%, since the projections of your revenue, of your business revenue, of your company are estimated to reduce by 5%. So if your cloud fees, if your yearly fees of cloud providers are not directly linked, correlated to your business revenue, to your business objective, then Houston, you have a problem. And the solution is not lift and shift. Lift and shift is the way to take a server in your legacy infrastructure and just shift it to the cloud using a virtual machine or whatever. This is not a strategy. This is a bridge. This is the starting phase, the starting point that puts you in the roadmap for the transformation to the cloud that your company will benefit from it. Of course, there are situations where lift and shift, the strategy, or the method of lift and shift is appropriate. For example, if your SLAs are directly linked to your requirements of your customers and your cloud provider does not provide the SLAs that you require, if you have specific security needs or policies that your cloud service provider does not provide. Or, of course, if you have some framework, some sort of framework that is not compliant or is not fully supported by the cloud service provider, then, of course, lift and shift is an option, but it's just the starting point. You should take into account another scenarios where platform as a service plays a main role, because otherwise you could be in trouble. Because if you just take the legacy applications and put it in the cloud, probably you will get a lot of trouble, probably. Not at the very beginning, but probably in the mid or in the long term, you will get troubles. But I think, as you say, keep calm. So there is no problem that we cannot solve. And in fact, we are in this presentation to give you some hints, some ideas to get all of these challenges and turn them into solutions. And let's talk about the cost of the cloud. There are several strategies that you can follow in order to reduce at a minimum the cost of the cloud spending that you may have. For example, you can identify which instances are not 100% used, and you could downsize these instances. For example, instead of using, let's say, M4 large instances, you could turn it down to T2 small. That probably will give the same level of services, but with, let's say, a huge percentage in terms of cost reduction. You could also identify even instances that are not even used at a specific periods of time, because usually people tend to estimate or make the sizing of the infrastructure according to the peak, but probably your infrastructure does not require to have this infrastructure for all the time. So you could turn off instances, or you could also use serverless, which has the ability for you to pay only when the instance is being used. So please, recommendation, use serverless, which is available in much more any cloud provider so far. So, and of course, for example, you should take advantage of the different discounts and different pricing structures that the different cloud providers provide. For example, you could take advantage of reserved instances that can allow you to get a discount if you pay in advance. So there are many strategies to deal with cost. And the good news is that the performance and the scalability of your solution is not directly linked to the cost reduction. So you could play with a cloud-native model that leverages things such as software-defined architecture, like microservices, like containers orchestration, and so on. And you could also adapt, even using predictive escalation mechanisms, for example, based on machine learning, for example, to adapt your and scale depending on the demand that you have. So there are many tools available in the cloud toolbox to allow you to be scalable and performance. And don't forget about security. If you take just your servers using a legacy infrastructure approach and take it to the cloud, probably you will have some problems. You have to re-engineer and you have to re-architect your application so that these problems does not arise. Because usually the paradigm when you use in a standard IT platform is more a castle and fences approach. And now we are not anymore talking about castles. We are talking more about hotels with where you have a card, and this card allows you to give access to some levels or floors and whatever. So you have to adapt again. And for security itself, for example, you might find useful red teams, blue teams approach, where you have different teams competing with each other, trying to get the attackers and the defenders, and trying to get an holistic approach about security in the cloud. And don't forget about innovation, because cloud fosters innovation. Why? because at the end, innovation is the ability to reduce the cost of failure. So we don't want to fail, but of course, if we want to innovate, you will fail. What you want is that these failures are cheap. And in order to do this, the cloud allows you to build fast prototyping and to build and test services and products that get you to your customer faster. So if we talk about 5 years later, probably your competitors were using the cloud to reduce costs. This is still an objective, but it's not the only one. Probably today, your competitors are using the cloud to take competitive advantage based on the innovation capabilities of the cloud. Let me tell you about an example. This is one of our customers from Opentrends. We developed for Fira de Barcelona, which is IFEMA, is a similar infrastructure here, but in Barcelona, hosting events like the Mobile World Congress, where we built a cloud infrastructure with all these components, where we hide all the complexity to the IT staff. We made them keep calm, and of course, we provided some cost reduction also. In fact, when we started the project, we made a TCO estimation of the predicted cost reduction that we would have when moving to the cloud. This was 1.4 million was the initial cost of the on-premise infrastructure, and then the estimation led us to a reduction of more than 1 million of cost reduction. At the end, when we deployed the project, surprisingly, we were beyond expectations, beyond the original expectations, and we achieved a cost about less than 300K, which is even better than the most original expectations. And this was for a huge event like the Mobile World Congress, where hundreds of thousands of users were attending the event, given a real mission-critical requirement. So, as you can see, cost reduction is not the contrary, the opposite of having a really scalable solution, a really performant solution. And for this, the architecture part of the solution is very important. The way of designing, like in this case, a solution based on microservices that can scale, of containers that are, for example, deployed in a small cluster, but then can scale to a bigger cluster when the demand requires it. And it's important also to point out that in this scenario where we achieve this cost reduction, later on we hand over this infrastructure to operations. So we design the architecture and then we hand over to operations. And suddenly, when it was under the hood of the operations team, the cost raised from 3 to 10K per month. So it means that it's not a question of the architecture. It's not a question of the infrastructure. It's a question of the architecture, of the right architecture of doing things, and the wrong decisions can lead to a cost increase that you could save. So, and just let me finalize. If we have the right architecture, we are ready. If we have the right strategy to go for the cloud migration path, we are prepared. And don't forget the innovation that fosters the cloud. And if we are successful, we can emulate Jeff Bezos, which is the owner of this rocket. Jeff Bezos happens to be the owner of Amazon and also the owner of Amazon Web Services, that wants to put a man back in the moon in the next few years. So please be ambitious, and with your cloud projects, believe that the results are really achievable. So thank you.